Let's start with something a little uncomfortable. Most people move through their entire lives assuming they think and feel the way everyone else does. They assume their inner world, the way they process emotions, the way they react to silence, the way they lie awake replaying conversations, is just the human experience. Shared, universal, normal. But psychology tells a different story. There is a specific set of behavioral and cognitive patterns that researchers have identified as markers of unusually deep psychological processing. And the people who carry these patterns often spend years, sometimes their entire lives, believing something is fundamentally wrong with them, when in reality, their minds simply work differently. Not broken, not disordered, just wired in a way that most of the population isn't. So here are 7 signs that you're not psychologically normal, and why that might be the most interesting thing about you. Sign 1, you replay conversations long after they've ended. Most people move on. You don't. Hours later, sometimes days later, your mind is still running back through what was said, what wasn't said, what you should have said. You reconstruct the tone. You reconsider the pauses. You wonder whether the other person walked away feeling the same way you did. From the outside, this looks like overthinking. And in its extreme form, psychologists do link it to anxiety and rumination loops. But here's what's less often talked about. A milder version of this pattern is actually associated with significantly higher emotional intelligence. Research published in the journal Emotion found that people who mentally revisit social interactions tend to score higher on empathy measures, not because they're anxious, but because they're trying to genuinely understand what happened from every angle. They're not just remembering a conversation, they're processing it the way a researcher processes data, looking for meaning, looking for truth. Most people simply don't do that. Sign 2, noise bothers you more than it bothers other people. Not just loud music at a concert, the hum of a refrigerator in a quiet room, a conversation happening 2 rooms away, the specific scrape of a chair being dragged across a floor. If you've ever sat in an environment that everyone else seemed perfectly comfortable in, while you felt quietly overwhelmed, there is a neurological reason for that. Psychologist Elaine Aron spent years researching what she called the highly sensitive person, and her findings revealed something striking. Roughly 15 to 20% of the population has a nervous system that processes sensory information more deeply and thoroughly than average. It's not a disorder. It's not fragility. It's a trait that appears across many species and seems to serve an evolutionary function, deeper awareness of the environment. People with this trait tend to notice things others miss, process experiences more richly, and yes, feel overstimulated in environments that others breeze through without a second thought. Sign 3, you feel other people's emotions almost physically. There are people who hear that a colleague had a rough morning and feel a faint echo of it themselves, who walk into a room and immediately sense that something is off before anyone has said a word, who watch a stranger struggle and feel something shift in their own chest. If that sounds familiar, your brain's mirror neuron system, the neurological architecture that forms the basis of empathy, may be unusually active. Studies on affective empathy show that a distinct subset of people don't just cognitively understand what others are feeling, they somatically experience it. Researchers call this emotional contagion, and it's far less common than popular culture suggests. For most people, empathy is intellectual. For you, it might be something closer to physical. Sign 4, you need to be alone to fully recharge, even after events you genuinely enjoyed. This goes beyond the standard definition of introversion. This is about psychological recovery at a deeper level. Research in cognitive load theory suggests that people who are fully present in social situations, reading the subtext, tracking emotional undercurrents, managing tone, expend significantly more mental energy than people who engage more surface level. The exhaustion you feel after a dinner you actually loved or a conversation you found genuinely stimulating isn't antisocial behavior. It's your brain communicating that it needs time to process everything it just absorbed. You weren't disengaged. You were, in fact, more engaged than almost anyone else in the room. Sign 5. You've always felt slightly out of step with your age group. As a child, you connected more easily with adults. As an adult, you sometimes find more genuine connection with people significantly older or younger than you. Your interests felt more serious or more eclectic than the people around you, and there was always this quiet, low-level sense of not quite fitting the mold of your peers. Not in a dramatic way, just a persistent, subtle awareness of being on a slightly different frequency. Developmental psychologists describe this as asynchronous development, the experience of having certain cognitive and emotional capacities that mature ahead of social ones. It's closely associated with above-average intellectual curiosity, a tendency to question things others accept without examination, and a genuine discomfort with shallow interaction. You didn't grow up wrong. You grew up ahead of a particular curve. Sign 6. You find it genuinely difficult to do things you don't believe in. Most people can compartmentalize. They can smile through meetings they disagree with, push through tasks that feel meaningless, follow rules without needing to understand why. There's a kind of psychological flexibility in that, and for many people, it's simply how they survive modern life. But if doing things that conflict with your values creates a specific, persistent internal friction that's genuinely hard to push past, if you feel something close to physical discomfort when asked to act in ways that don't align with what you believe, you likely have what psychologists call high-value behavior congruence, combined with strong moral sensitivity. Research shows that people with tightly integrated value systems experience real psychological cost when forced to act against them. It's not stubbornness. It's not rigidity. It's a deep form of internal coherence that most people simply aren't built with. Sign 7. You've always suspected that the people around you are performing, even when they don't realize it themselves. You notice the gap between what people say and what they mean. You pick up on the tension in a room before anyone has acknowledged it. You sense when someone's enthusiasm is slightly forced, or when a smile doesn't quite reach the eyes. And sometimes, you find yourself nodding along to a conversation, while a quieter part of your mind is tracking something entirely different. The subtext, the dynamic, the thing nobody is saying out loud. This is called high social perceptiveness, and studies on interpersonal accuracy consistently show that it's a genuine cognitive ability, not a personality quirk, not suspicion, not paranoia. People with this trait process nonverbal cues, micro-expressions, and tonal inconsistencies at a level of detail that most people simply don't register consciously. You're not reading too much into things. You're reading things that are actually there, things that other people's brains filter out before they ever reach conscious awareness. Here's what's worth holding on to after all of this. Psychology has spent decades trying to define normal, and what the research consistently reveals is that the further you sit from the statistical average, in sensitivity, in depth of processing, in emotional complexity, in moral precision, the more likely you are to experience the world as quietly overwhelming and quietly extraordinary at the same time. The things that made you feel different your entire life, the replaying, the overstimulation, the empathy that sometimes felt like too much, the values you couldn't compromise, the perceptions others seem to miss entirely. None of that is a flaw in your design. It might just be the design itself. And the world, it turns out, has always needed people built exactly like that.